Today I'm joined by Anne Matthews, Clinic Director of Belfast Chiropractic Clinic and Complementary Therapies, and also the author of this great book, What is My Child Telling Me That I'm Not Getting Yet? So Anne, I'm so excited to hear about the book, but welcome first of all to the podcast.
Yes, many thanks, Sarah, for having me down, and I enjoyed my drive down to Newry. It just feels like I'm going on holidays.
Lovely. Yes, we're very close to the border and the sun is shining today, which is quite unusual this year, but it is. So a little bit of background to Anne. Dr. Anne Matthews is an independent practitioner chiropractor with over 3 decades of clinical experience. Her professional background includes physiotherapy, chiropractic, biomechanics and craniosacral technique, together with neurodevelopmental training and pre- and perinatal education. She set up the Belfast Chiropractic Clinic and Complementary Therapies in 1987, so quite some time ago. And her patient base consists predominantly of babies, young children and pregnant women. And her passion is in working with families through the lens of a pre- and perinatal educator as she helps parents both read and interpret their child's baby body language. Who knew? It's so fascinating. And Anne has recently written this book for parents to answer some of those big questions that you get asked regularly. So it's a vital resource for parents and covers how to help your baby meet their milestones, learn about your child's baby body language, and it's a guide to problem solving your child's challenges. Now, Anne, you're in quite a privileged position, really, but you must, and I know you do, provide help to so many. Just reading the testimonials at the beginning, of one parent there, or patient's parent, I cannot recommend Anne and her team highly enough. Our children love her, and we love her, and we are so grateful to her for all of her care and support to us as a family. So I'd love to know, how did all of this start for you? How did you become such a key person in people's lives?
I was reflecting on that, and there have been a few incidents in my life where I feel that has been a key. And things like, I was always good with my hands, so I enjoyed creative stuff. I enjoyed knitting, I enjoyed crochet and so forth, enjoyed working with animals and having a dog, And as a young teenager, I had an accident in which I was cycling madly down a field and I got caught in a clothesline, basically, and I tried to decapitate myself, which was very funny to my sisters who were observing.
Oh dear.
But I was brought to the local hospital having had this very sore neck, and the young doctor that was attending to us had taken the x-rays, and he said, no, there's no fractures, and she's just a young teenager looking attention. And I thought, my goodness, I think I could do better than that.
Gosh, is that really
Yes, so
awful?
I remember thinking, I could do better than that, relating to someone with neck pain. And that was just me as a 13-year-old. Roll on a year and my neck is still bothering me, and I attend, my mother takes me to a physiotherapist, and he's actually the Northern Ireland physio at that time. So this is like in the 70s. And his name is Bobby McGregor, and it was the most inspiring thing I've ever experienced, because he did open treatment work. So in an open room, he was treating the women in this open room. So he would treat you and educate you on the way, explaining why you had the injury. He was able to tell me the length of time that I had it, how it affected my eyesight and so forth. So I was totally hooked by this man. See? So roll on more years, and I start physiotherapy because I think that's how I'm going to be able to work like this man.
So you're a physio first?
Yes,
yeah.
So I'd studied physiotherapy. I was studying physiotherapy, and I'd been tending him during that period of time. And in my 3rd year of physiotherapy, he died.
Oh.
Yes, he died of a heart attack at one of the Northern Ireland Games. I was devastated, because my plan was I was going to work with him. Now, I hadn't discussed this with him, but my plan was that I was going to be a trainee with him. And then he died. God. So I discovered, and then there's a little note in a magazine around chiropractic. So I went over to visit the college in Bournemouth. That's the only college in Europe at that time. That was the Anglo-European College of Chiropractic. So that was in the late, or in the early 80s about this time. And then I was hooked on chiropractic. So really I moved, and the reason why I say that, it was around finding palpatory skills, meaning your hands-on touch and feel. So I basically did 2 back-to-back courses, physiotherapy and then chiropractic. So when I came back to Northern Ireland in 1986, I was the first female chiropractor in Northern Ireland at that time. And I knew I was always going to set up a practice. I knew that I was going to, although I was working from my parents' home, I wanted to provide professional rooms, professional clinic rooms. I wanted to find that. So I always had this vision as to where I was going on one level. I was going to work with my hands. I was going to work with people. I was going to work in a nice environment. Yeah, so that's how it grew.
And tell me what the reaction was to people when you even said the word chiropractic. Perhaps they understood physio a little bit. What was this hocus pocus?
They had no idea. They had no idea. And that was understandable because there was only one other chiropractor in Northern Ireland in the 1986, and I was the first female. And I was the only one in Belfast. So people would get it mixed up with chiropody, for example.
Yeah.
You know? So I really wanted to lift the understanding of chiropractic, understand the difference between physiotherapy and chiropractic. Now, in those days, there was, as in all professions, there's professional jealousy, whereas I always saw it as a progression. I studied physiotherapy, I studied chiropractic, I developed my palpatory skills, I studied craniosacral, so I developed them even more. And in that progression, it allowed me to develop the skill of working with small babies, with newborns, which is a very different skill to working with an adult.
And they're so fragile and so delicate, and people are bringing these, their most precious little person to you.
Absolutely, and I feel every day I feel very privileged around that. I feel very grateful. I also am probably very good at helping a mum navigate that, because she is giving her precious child over. Not that I actually take the precious child off a mum. That's something that I'm very different about other therapists. I will always treat and manage a baby on a mum's lap. And in actual fact, I won't even make contact with the baby as such. I will just guide a mum as to what that baby is explaining to her. So that brings you on to the baby body language part of things.
So what are mums or parents coming to you with? Well, why do they need to come to you?
Well, they usually come at a time where they just do not have any other answers. And they've tried so many other things. They're at the end of their tether. They have an unsettled baby, a baby that doesn't sleep at night, a baby that has constipation, an older child that is not going through their developmental milestones, for example, is commando crawling rather than 4-point crawling. And if these things get left unattended, you will then have the children that at nursery or P1 particularly, around those ages, where the child is finding it uncomfortable to sit. But that's not how people see it. They see it as that child just won't pay attention and won't sit down and whatever. But in actual fact, the child is more often uncomfortable.
Is that right? See, this is a whole new world for me, and I'm sure for many of the listeners to the podcast as well. So this is all stems from...
Well, it can actually. So when I help a mum understand and read and interpret her child's body language, and I say particularly a mum because a baby will have been inside a mum 35 plus weeks. So I often say the dad or the partner, mum will always have that time up on you, because there's been a connection made there. And I just need to get a mum back into that intuitiveness that she already had when she was pregnant, basically. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the baby's unsettled or perhaps not meeting the milestones, but even just having that recognition, I suppose, looking at your child starting, it's not something that we tend to do naturally, is it? Read their body language. How did you discover baby body language, and what should we be looking for?
Well, interesting enough, I feel a mum does do it. However, those around her and the influences around her are convincing her otherwise. That's why she's often at the end of her tether, because part of her knows there's something wrong. Part of her then, for example, those words that we use, just a needy child, it's just a spoiled child. Oh, my son didn't start talking till he was 5. Oh, they'll be grand, or there's so many throwaway comments that are made. So I help a mum wind back and get back into her intuitive self, and when I say their intuitive self, understand where she's holding fear in her body, because that's then triggering her. That's triggering her fight-flight response. And when you're in fight-flight response, you're not in your intuitive self. And as a mum, that's really important, because babies can pick up on that. So basically, I help a mum wind back her nervous system so that she's more settled. And when she's more settled, it becomes glaringly obvious to her what her baby is telling her. And that's just a wonderful, wonderful place to get a mum.
So can you give me some examples of what the baby might be telling her?
Well, yes. For example, I had a new baby in clinic yesterday, and this baby was about 8 weeks old. And Mummy said she'd been very busy all day. She'd been at a hospital appointment. This was now 2:00 in the afternoon. So they were full on. Busy time. And Mum was part breastfeeding and part bottle feeding. And when she came into the room, she said, she told me that. And then the baby started crying. And she said, oh, I need to feed the baby again. And she said, oh, but I've just fed them. So that's a little pause for me. Because I gently said, and I wonder what the baby's telling you that you see that needs another bottle. Oh, because it's crying. And I thought, that's interesting. So I know that I need to reframe that with that mum. Yeah, because then she gave the other bottle, but the baby was already patting their head, stroking their head, patting the back of their ear several times, which showed me where the baby was holding tension. So the baby was crying because of the tension that they were holding. And then Mummy fed her. But in Mummy feeding the baby, she actually supported her little head, and her little head went back. So in actual fact, Mummy was relieving the pressure on the back of her head. Oh. But if I hadn't have guided that, Mummy would have thought, oh, she just needs another bottle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's always what we do.
Exactly. We don't want a crying
dummy
baby.
Babies. We can't have that.
We don't want a crying baby because a crying baby triggers us.
Yes. Yes.
And you know yourself when you, as a mum,
stress of it. Yes.
Exactly. Even you could be in the shopping centre and you hear a baby crying over there and you go, would someone look after that baby? Mm-hmm. You feel yourself as a mother, you feel yourself being triggered that way, So I then help a mum wind back. So this mummy, when she first came in, was sitting at the edge of the settee, the sofa. I have a lovely sofa that they're not expecting to sit on, So, and by the time we were finished, she was lounging in the sofa with the baby.
Didn't want to leave.
Didn't want to leave, exactly. And she's
nice
smiling, and she looks so much younger, and the baby's sleeping, and she's just delighted, and they don't really want to move from my room, which sometimes gets hard,
Don't let me go back out there. So again, if you can learn the language or stop thinking I've got to keep feeding, what else could it be?
Mm-hmm. And the same with going to bed at night. For example, that parents will say, oh, I hate the bedtimes because they go mad or they don't sleep or I have to lie with them for hours. Now that baby is telling you that their little nervous system is out of sync. Yeah. And mummy or daddy might be out of sync as well. And sometimes life just gets so busy. Like I had a mummy in yesterday as well with 3 young kids, and she just says, and her little boy was 6, and she said, I think we're doing too much. He loves doing all these sports and he's very good at them, but he's doing something every day. And so I didn't have to tell her. She was already telling me, so I was just reflecting this back to her and saying, yeah, we're feeding the fight-flight response. Busy. Yeah. And in this world at the moment we're living, it's very busy.
People can't switch off.
We can't switch off. So we need to have pauses. So I was saying, and I would describe it as a pause rather than a stop. because stop's too harsh. But we're going to pause and maybe have a longer time, maybe have a longer breakfast, on a Sunday, have a more family elongated time.
And stay in our pajamas a little longer.
Exactly. Like that last Sunday. It was definitely a switching on the fire, lighting the fire day.
The day it rained all day.
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
And,
and I can remember that actually when I had baby number 2. Just thought, trying to just be these super parents, keeping up with the Joneses, doing everything that you're expected to do. And I was like, and we're so tired after a working week. So what about if we just
pause?
And let the kids be.
Yeah. And it's
the
hard.
way we were when we were little, although when we were little, we just were put out in the back garden to play. You can't do that just as much now.
No.
So we learn, and all the different generations do different things. So, if there's anybody listening to this now that would like to know more, or why would they come, and would you recommend the book first and foremost?
Well, I think nowadays we want a quick fix.
Yeah, that's true.
See what I mean? So coming in and attending with your baby, I want them to stop crying. I want them to poo properly. I want them not to be anxious. I want them to sleep through the night. And there's a certain amount I can do in a treatment session. But if I can get a mummy and daddy and partner or carer to think beyond that, you're investing in your child for life. This isn't just now. Because when I get you to think in terms of reading and interpreting baby body language, you'll do it for your teenage child, your adult child. You won't go through these periods where you're locking horns with children, because when you're locking horns with children, older children, it's because you're not on the right wavelength with them. Yeah. And our nervous systems are out of sync. So I explain a lot about nervous systems. It's the setting. It's like when you want to reboot your computer or reboot the boiler, you press the reset button. So what you're saying is, with a child, you want to help them to go back to their pre-delivery settings.
I didn't even ever consider those before.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So what?
But that's okay,
Yeah.
As we live, we learn, and we did the best that we could at the time. And when we know better, we do better. So it's not about regret. It's always about understanding and how we can help the next generation.
What about the whole giving birth and being born? How big a thing is that for a baby? We know about how big it is for the mama and how difficult it is, but what does being born do to a baby? Because we can't remember our own birth.
Well, we may not be able to remember it cerebrally, but we're actually remembering it in our nervous system, pre-verbal. So don't forget that communication is something like over 90% is nonverbal. And remember, kids might only be speaking, learning words or formulating words by 12 months, 18 months, 2 years. Some might be later. So that doesn't mean they're not communicating. So they've actually been communicating in the womb, and we know that. So we know that from the studies. Kids can learn from the womb. Yeah. So again, it's reframing our narrative around it, where we think that babies don't know. But they do know on this energetic, somatic, what we call somatic level. That's where the craniosacral work comes into play. Because as a craniosacral therapist, we would release the tension that's been held in the soma. So, meaning where it's held in your joints, your muscles, and so forth. Yeah, so that's where it gets gummed up.
So you apply hands to their little heads then?
Well, yes. I will also guide a mum.
Yes.
Again, I will guide a mum how to massage their baby.
And baby massages.
Absolutely.
Lovely to watch. We've seen those videos online as well.
It's lovely, isn't it?
We all love that.
Exactly.
That touch.
Yeah, to love the well, exactly. To love, because that's where they first learnt, is that sensory touch before the verbals. So sensory, so our senses are huge. So for a baby, what they can only see is our face, our eyes. They can smell mummy. They can sense mummy. They can hear mummy. You know, so those 5 senses are being well formed in a baby, you know. Their hearing is one of the first to develop in the womb.
So you have children yourself. Did you know all of this when you were having your babies?
No, I didn't know all of it, but I knew some of it. For example, I knew how important it was for us to be active during our pregnancy. I knew how important it was to have a positive birth experience. Now, birth experiences don't always have to be easy or hard. Sometimes we talk about that it was very hard for mummy. But I will also say to you that what we're saying is that we are building our resilience, because a mum can have what we call a tough birth, but she and baby managed it. They did it. They survived. So I talk about mummies and babies being survivors rather than being victims. Yeah, you survived it. Well done. Yes, maybe things could have been different. Yes, maybe. But you survived it and you can do it. Yeah.
Would many women come to you with bad birth experiences or you know, they haven't had a baby before and they're really scared?
Well, often a mum will come with a bad birth experience and say, I do not want to do that again. So, but I do want to have another baby and I really want to look at it differently. Or they'll come with their second baby, as did a mummy recently, came with a second baby and had a much more positive experience. But in that positive experience, she did healing around the first birth, you know. And then we can address the first birth. Yeah. So yes, in my situation, it was very important around that. And for my first baby, I knew I wanted a water delivery. So that was 1992. And at Dundonald, at the Ulster Hospital, I had to meet the maternity services. I had to do the whole stuff. I had to meet them, bring all my books with me, tell them why I wanted a water delivery, and then I had to rent the pool. And there was 2 midwives there who were very, very keen to do it with me, and they actually went for training about a month beforehand. And then from that, the Ulster Hospital then bought their own. They hired their own pool, and then they have their own pools now.
So you were one of the first to have a water birth, do you
think?
I
was the first to have a water birth.
You were the first in Northern Ireland?
My son, Tim. We were the first to have a water delivery in Northern Ireland, yeah.
And was it as good as you had hoped?
Well, at that stage, I didn't know any different.
No, I know
but
you never
it was
did.
good.
Yeah.
Labouring in water was excellent.
Yeah.
I had a very quiet, soft room, which was good. So, yeah, it's had a very positive experience.
Did you do it for the next one?
Unfortunately, the next one was kind of different because, and this is really what you asked me, what inspired me further. My next pregnancy was in 1994, which wasn't quite a happy one because I don't know whether you remember, 1994 was a terrible time here in Northern Ireland. There was just tit-for-tat murders, for example. Right. And there was one particular one that really affected me. I was in my second to third trimester at that time, and a mum had been brutally murdered in front of her 2 young children. And that really had a huge impact on me. And it's always still a bit upsetting because I delivered a stillborn at 28 weeks, just after that, you see. So that was devastating. It was really devastating. And then I had 2 other kids after that who I used water breaths from.
So the second was a harrowing.
It was harrowing, but I wanted to know why, because the results afterwards said that there was nothing to explain why the baby had died, you see. So I really wanted to understand that. And really that's directed me into this work of the pre and perinatal education. And really what I then gone back is how important it is to look after a mum. Mm-hmm. Because we really want to get mum out of that stress mode.
So do you really believe the trauma that you were experiencing with the news at that time contributed?
Absolutely. That the cortisol levels were too high. But of course that was all based on, and that may not have affected somebody else, but it affected me in that way because of my past, my childhood, what I experienced as a young teenager in the 70s in Northern Ireland, you know. It's an accumulative effect. Yeah. So even just looking at what's happening in the world today, can you imagine giving birth and a mum being pregnant, giving birth in the countries today that are
war
suffering?
Zones,
in war
absolutely.
zones. Can you imagine?
Fleeing persecution.
Exactly. So this is a generational trauma.
Yeah.
So it's like I want to do my little bit to help mums regulate themselves so they can help their little ones, because I know those little ones are going to have a better life later.
And if there are any mums-to-be listening today, what top tips would you be giving them if they're facing into, maybe it's a first baby, and everybody's telling them what to do and they're bombarded with every book and every bit of social media as to what's right to do? What would you say?
Yeah, and it's really tough. It's really tough, that. And I find it must be very hard for young mums. But to understand that we have a hormonal mix, mummy has and baby has, around how that birth experience is going to be. Baby knows that they're expecting to come down the birth canal and they're expecting to come out. That's what's in their DNA. That's what's in their neurology, to realise they have got primitive reflexes that are helping them to upturn and go south. Yeah. And so, and more that mummy can be helped to trust that.
Trust that, yeah.
And that's where the home from home and the midwives, they're trying to capture that again. Like, let's tune into mummy's intuitiveness, because that's what I do the other end. And I just need you to do it beforehand, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think we're going back to that?
Because
we medicalised deliveries for so long, and mums were really out of control then.
Well, it's getting the balance.
Yes.
It's not damning anybody.
No,
you know?
absolutely.
That's what had to happen, because there were a lot of mums lost during childbirth. Yes, absolutely. Maternity services were absolutely necessary, but we need to blend. And this is where, again, professional jealousy comes into play. If we could only work together for the better good of that mum and that baby.
Yes, and have those choices and
that's right.
Build trust and show that they're supporting this mum on whatever happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. So there's that, and then you ask me what else. Well, pause more and regroup. And also allow for a wonderment and awe for a new mum and a baby. Like, for example, there's apps that you know, your baby's neurodevelopmental progress, and the mums are on it waiting for the next. I know. Just stop. Yes, of course you can access it, but enjoy the moment where the baby's first smile, baby's first burp, whatever it is, baby's first laugh. Enjoy and give them feedback and that awe and wonderment.
It's lovely.
Stop robbing them of those experiences.
It's been such a fascinating discussion so far, but this is a business podcast.
Yes, exactly. I don't know how did we get to here? Sarah?
I went down the rabbit hole because I just find it so interesting. But, you know, what about running the business that you run? Is it just you, or do you have a team? And how do you manage being that working woman?
Well, in the Belfast Chiropractic Clinic and Complementary Therapies, which was set up 37 years ago, I've always been of the ilk where we want to support patients that attend us. We want to promote good lifestyle choices, for example. That's always been my motto. And we also want to provide chiropractic care, which wasn't available anywhere else, which was quite interesting. Yeah. And that juggle, and I knew I would want children, and really they've always come first, and that work-life balance had to be created. And yeah.
Do you think you've got it right?
No, of course I haven't. But I'm always reviewing, pause and review, and I'm just very enthusiastic about the topic. So I will always be working.
And then writing this book, I know before we came into the studio, you said that it took probably about 2 years, but you must be very proud of it.
Yes, I am. Yes. Yeah, thank you. And I think coming into the studio today was helpful just to pause for myself, actually, and review where I've come in the last 37 years, I thought, oh, that's rather good.
Yes, you are allowed to give yourself a pat on the back. You're allowed to do that.
That's good.
Celebrating the win. And so much that you can share. And how do you ensure that you stay up to date with all the latest practices, or are you very much a traditionalist? Do you evolve the way you
Oh, absolutely.
practice?
I'm a very progressive person.
Yes.
I think in the old days we called it postgraduate education, and now we call it continuing professional development.
Yes.
I think I invented it because I've always been progressing. And as chiropractors, for example, in our practice, we belong to it's legally obligatory that you belong to practice chiropractic in the UK, to belong to the General Chiropractic Council. And part of that is maintaining and safeguarding both patients and the chiropractors. And there is a requirement that we maintain our professional standards. But that's not really new to me because I've always had it at the clinic. So I have a great team. There's a great team at the Belfast Chiropractic Clinic. We have 3 chiropractors, and I've always had ancillary or other integrative care within the practice, like we talked about massage earlier. I've always had a massage therapist on board. We have craniosacral therapists and a mind coach and nutritional therapy. So we have an umbrella of disciplines.
And do you employ these people, or are they associates?
Yeah, they're associates within the practice.
That model. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you like that model? That works well for you?
Oh, absolutely. It's a great model.
Yes.
Because everybody has a vested interest in working as a team. So it's not renting the room. Yes, there's space, but I don't want that space filled. I want someone to join the team so that we can all work together. So there's a lot of buddying goes on within the team, and we learn from each other and we push each other.
Which is great.
Yeah.
And learning from people and better people, as you say,
That's
it's
right.
all part of that continuous personal development. When I hear the word chiropractic, I must say I'm a little bit squeamish myself, and I have had experiences, but is it for everyone?
If I comment that a good chiropractor is one who knows when not to make an adjustment.
Yeah.
Because like what you just said.
If you're scared.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So again, it's gone back to the nervous system. You need to read your audience. So I would need to read that and say, okay, there's other techniques I have to help you to rebalance your body. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But your body's out of line. So as a chiropractor, we'll be able to read where your body is not in ideal alignment, not in optimal alignment. And there's various techniques that we have. That's where the massage and the physiotherapy techniques come in. And all my team would use those techniques. One of my team, she's involved in women's health. So she's very much works from the hypopressive training. So that's looking at pelvic floor work, for example, Another will look from the craniosacral aspect of things. So we're looking at having other fine touch techniques. And I think this, again, is where social media blasts the wrong stuff. The fake news, the wrong stuff,
Well, that's it. And it's just, making sure that you can trust and you've got somebody there. Because you always fear that some damage could be done. But I know there are other people that absolutely, their chiropractor is the most important person in their life, because the relief that they get, and when they are aligned and adjusted, they can cope with life.
That's right, yeah. Because you're in optimal alignment, your nervous system is in sync with yourself. So, and I've built that up at the Belfast Chiropractic Clinic over the past 37 years, So our self-referral system speaks for itself.
37 years is a long time.
It is a long time. I'm quite old then.
No, you're not. I'm just wondering,
Mm-hmm.
sign of winding down, or is this something that you'll be doing forever?
No, I think I'm just very passionate about it. I've written the book, the pluses around the pandemic, where that it introduced us and me. Well, for example, I had just introduced a new digital system to the clinic, which allowed us then to use telehealth during pandemic. So we were able to speak to patients on video within our own system, which was excellent. So, and I never thought I'd be interested in online work, but
well, especially because you were all about touch.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Whereas now I can do online work. That's what I want to do, following on from the book. Whereas I can do online courses with parents and teach them how to connect with their baby from reading their baby body language.
So that's what's next?
That's what's next, yeah.
You're extremely busy and extremely interesting to talk to, Anne Matthews, but I can't let you leave the studio today without asking the question that I ask of everyone about the purpose of this podcast, which is to inspire existing business owners and those ambitious entrepreneurs out there to grow their business by offering an insight into the success of businesses such as Belfast Chiropractic Clinic and Complementary Therapies. That's the biggest name of a business I've had. But what advice would you give to people who may have that business idea but have no idea where to begin or are unsure as to whether it's a risk worth taking?
Well, I think having passion, they need to be passionate about whatever the ideas they have, because if they have, they'll have some idea where they're going with it. I also feel being accountable, making yourself accountable to someone else. For example, we're very fortunate now that we have the likes of Go Succeed in all the towns, where you can have a business mentor, for example. Be held accountable by someone else other than your family.
Yes.
Yeah. So passion and accountability will help to give you direction, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So 2 words that I have written down, and thank you so much, Anne, and thank you for bringing me this copy of the book. I look forward to reading fully. I've just flicked through at this stage, but where can anybody get hold of your lovely book?
Well, if you go onto my website, it's www.wholesomelyconnected.com, and they can buy the book directly from my website. And of course, it's available on Amazon, but I'd love you to support me locally.
Absolutely. No, that's great. So what is my child telling me that I'm not getting yet, by Anne Matthews. Thank you so much, Anne, for joining us today. And do join me again for another fantastic episode of the Public Eye Podcast very soon. This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service, where our team using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.